Hello again and welcome to another Tango Practica Tips. Today I'll be discussing one of the most common issues I find I have to correct our Practica, and that is our embrace or el abrazo. But in order to do that, we first have to look at our anatomy, specifically how our shoulder is designed and how our arms can move so that we can create an embrace that is comfortable and also flexible at the same time. You also may be surprised to find out that how we use our shoulders can directly affect our posture. And as for all dancers know, our posture is one of the most important things that we have to correct in tango. Let's start with an exercise to see how our shoulder actually works. So if I take my right arm and lift it up, keep an eye on what happens to that shoulder. Did you see it? Do it one more time. And can you see how high it raised up, kind of because I raised my arm up? Now, if I do this, if I rotate my shoulder and then go up, do you see a difference in my shoulder now? Again, I'm rotating this arm and going up. And you may wonder, well, why is that? Well, let's try it out for yourself. Let's take your, in this case, your left hand, place it over your right shoulder. If you lift up your arm just straight up, you can feel how your shoulder here just raises up because there's a bone there that just kind of, that goes up. But if you rotate your upper arm around, rotating it to the outside, and then taking my arm up, you will notice that this shoulder then stays downward. Well, why is that? Well, let's take a look at our anatomy of our shoulder and this structure here.
Big Dude is back with us again, and here are two views of his right arm. Above the upper arm bone, we have the clavicle in the front of the chest joining the acromion, which is part of the scapula or shoulder blade. In the image on the right, note the shape of the head of the humerus, which has a bump on the outside. It's this shape that can pull up our acromion and hence our shoulder blade if we just lift our arms straight up. However, spiraling our humerus backwards gets that bump out of the way.
We're going to take your fingers, and most of you already know where your clavicle is, and so we're going to take our fingers and just travel up our clavicle toward our shoulder. Now, as you get to a certain point, we'll start feeling another bone called the acromion that is actually at the end of the clavicle. So you have a clavicle, then you have a little joint here, and then if you move your arm a little bit, you'll find that you have this other bone. And both of these bones cover the humerus. The humerus is what we call our upper arm bone, and it's rounded, it's a ball and socket, so that allows us to rotate it around. Now, if we do not rotate our humerus, what happens is that when we just simply lift our humerus, that forces these bones here to come up with it. However, if we rotate our humerus, then we can raise this arm without raising this shoulder. So watch again here. Without rotating my shoulder, these bones come up. With rotating my shoulder, these shoulders stay down. And that is a very useful thing to know, especially if you're dancing with a much taller partner. Especially for women, when you have to come all the way up here, usually the gals are taller. Doing this is much more comfortable than just doing this, right? It's going to put less stress on your shoulders here. So we know that we can rotate our humerus this way because, again, it's a ball and socket. But we also have rotations, a separate rotation in our forearm, and again, in our wrist. And using all of these abilities to rotate independently can help us create a comfortable embrace that allows for different sizes of partners, different shapes of our embrace when we go through different figures, And it also helps us with our posture. Let me share with you one of my issues that I have with my shoulders. So if I turn sideways, and I'll come closer and take a notice. So this is my left shoulder, and this is my right shoulder. You may notice how far forward this shoulder is compared to this shoulder. Why that is, I don't know. It's been that way for years, but it's something that I have to continually work on to bring it back. And I have to say it's much better. What's happened is that basically anytime I want to do anything with this arm, I'm right-handed, even if I want to point, my shoulder wants to help me. Okay? And so I have had to break it of that habit. One of the things I do quite frequently to try to combat this is to rotate my shoulder back. So what does that do? Well, what it does is if I rotate my shoulder here, outward like this, then that opens up this whole area. And when I feel that happening, watch my head starts to relax. So here I am, if I'm just being, normal, not really thinking about anything, this would be my normal posture. When I get into tango posture, when I get into the embrace, I will start rotating that shoulder, the humerus out, and you can see this frees up this front of the area, it releases my clavicle, and it also helps me relax my head. And now my head can go back over my shoulder in a more natural way. So much earlier in our series, we talked about how important it is to keep your muscles relaxed so the bones can go back to where they belong. And this is an example of this. So one of the issues that often comes up has to do with straightening the back and keeping that good posture. You'll often be told, or when you think about it, pull your shoulders back, do all this other stuff, blah, 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 blah. And what you may end up doing is actually tightening these shoulders back here. So again, we're going back to all the stuff that Carolyn Johnson has talked to us with us about relaxing your feet, being grounded on the floor, letting your muscles go back on top of each other so that other muscles just aren't pulling it from different sides and creating all these problems. So now, let's take a look at what we can do to practice this rotation in the humerus and how we can apply it to our real world life so that we can maybe make it part of our muscle memory. Obviously, there's simply being aware of simply turning it, and several times a day, you may want to just rotate your humerus. But then also, while you're keeping the humerus turned in one direction, you're going to turn your forearm in the opposite direction. So in this case, I have my right arm rotating clockwise, and my lower arm, my forearm, rotating in the other direction. Okay, so counterclockwise. So I'm feeling this counter rotation. We always talk about that in our spine, but we can also do it with your arms. So humerus in one direction, clockwise on my right arm, and then counterclockwise on my left. And getting used to feeling that stretch, that difference in how we can move both parts of our arm in different directions.
Make sure you are rotating the thumb around the pinky or little finger as shown here. The arm bone on the pinky side, known as the ulna, normally stays stationary, while the arm bone on the thumb side, known as the radius, spirals around the pinky.
We don't want our arm to think that anytime we rotate out, this has to go on the outside like this. That's not actually true. We want to maintain this independence, if you will, of our forearm from our upper arm. Same thing with the other side here. I am rotating toward the outside. So that is what is this? This is going counterclockwise now, and my forearm is now turning clockwise in the opposite direction, and I'm just trying to feel this counter rotation so I can get this nice stretch of the muscles here in the different directions. And that will help me create some more flexibility in how I want to move in tango. That may come in handy with the embrace, like I said, whether you're doing a particular figure or whether you're trying to adjust for different shapes of partners that you might have. Now, let's look at how we might decide to use this in a real life setting. I do a lot of lifting at my job, and so one of the tricks that Carolyn has taught me is to actually try to pick things more up at the bottom. So I put my jacket on a chair here, and normally if I was to pick it up, I would actually rotate my hand and my humerus and my forearm would go in both directions, grab it, and then I'm going. Right? An alternative way of doing this, and for me, I have to think about this, but it's good that I have to think about this, is to actually, instead of picking up from the top, picking up from the bottom. If I do that, then that means I'm rotating my humerus up, or out rather, so that I can pick it up from the bottom. I'm also bending my knees, right, so that I can pick it up this way. And doing that, having this motion instead of just doing this or this, helps me reminds me to keep that rotation going. And it also helps free this up. Okay, and I can feel this as I'm rotating things here. I can feel when my head is tight and this is tight, and I go, oh, I got to release my head and my upper chest, and then I can pick this up. So that is a couple of ways that you can practice this at home, or if you're like me and you're lifting a lot of things, so at your job. So next time we'll be talking about different ways of embrace, because there's lots of different versions of it, and what's the type of things we look for when we are trying to create a comfortable embrace with a partner.